What we're going to do here is watch some clips from introductions and conclusions of some different speeches, and I'm going to pause the video at certain points and identify the elements of an introduction or a conclusion that the speaker is doing. We might talk about some things they do well. We'll talk about some things that I don't like, some ways that you can avoid those pitfalls. But it's going to be a very dynamic interaction here between me and the speech samples. So let's start with an introduction.
5 years ago.
All right, so right away she started with the story. 5 years ago, caught our attention, piqued our interest with something. She's going to tell us a story. So that's what she's doing. She's starting us off with something to draw us in. Let's see where this goes.
I experienced a bit of what it must have been like to be Alice in Wonderland.
All right, a little bit campy, a little bit cheesy to draw an analogy to Alice in Wonderland, especially as you go through this speech, you realize it's not necessarily related to what she's talking about. It could be clever, but that particular illustration kind of falls flat for me. I don't really see it as being that super effective. Let's see where else it goes.
Penn State asked me, a communications teacher, to teach a communications class for engineering students. And I was scared, really scared of these students with their big brains and their big books and their big unfamiliar words. But as these conversations unfolded, I experienced what Alice must have when she went down that rabbit hole and saw that door to a whole new world. That's just how I felt as I had those conversations with the students. I was amazed at the ideas that they had, and I wanted others to experience this wonderland as well. And I believe the key to opening that door is great communication.
There's her thesis. The key to opening that door between scientists and the rest of the world, implied there, is great communication. So we should be watching for the rest of her speech to focus on how good communication can open the door between scientists and the rest of the world.
We desperately need great communication from our scientists and engineers in order to change the world. Our scientists and engineers are the ones that are tackling our grandest challenges, from energy to environment to healthcare, among others.
And this is her justification, right? She started saying we need scientists to be able to do these things, to tackle these big problems in the world. And if they can't communicate to us, then we have a problem. So this is the justification for her topic.
And if we don't know about it and understand it, then the work isn't done. And I believe it's our responsibility as non-scientists to have these interactions. But these great conversations can't occur if our scientists and engineers don't invite us in to see their wonderland. So scientists and engineers, please talk nerdy to us.
Talk nerdy to us. A little bit cheesy, memorable, but a little awkward. I'm not sure that I like hearing her say those words, but it gets her point across, and she carries that through. So let's keep going.
I want to share a few keys on how you can do that to make sure that we can see that your science is sexy and that your engineering is engaging.
So that was the last thing she said. There was her previous statement. I'm going to share a few keys to see that your science is sexy and your engineering is engaging. Use some alliteration there, which is good, but also kind of previewed where she was going. I'm going to talk about several keys to good communication between scientists and engineers and the rest of the world. So let's take a look at the conclusion now.
So I think these are just a few keys that can help the rest of us to open that door and see the wonderland that is science and engineering.
So right away, she uses the phrase, the keys to open the door, which is the phrase she used in the introduction. So she's referring back to some of that same vocabulary, to that preview statement that she made about these are the keys that we're going to do, or the keys that we're going to look at to achieve this goal. So she's connecting that back, reviewing her main ideas. While she doesn't tell us exactly what the main points were, she reiterates what their purpose was.
And because the engineers that I've worked with have taught me to become really in touch with my inner nerd, I want to summarize with an equation.
So it's fun the way she does this, kind of drawing on inspiration from her subject matter to summarize for us. This is a clever way to summarize the main points. This is, in essence, her review of her main points specifically.
Take your science, subtract your bullet points and your jargon, divide by relevance, meaning share what's relevant to the audience, and multiply it by the passion that you have for this incredible work that you're doing. And that is going to equal incredible interactions that are full of understanding. And so scientists and engineers, when you've solved this equation, by all means, talk nerdy to me.
I cringe at that phrase. I talk nerdy to me. It just makes me feel uncomfortable, but it's memorable, and that's the interesting thing about this particular speech, is that it's memorable what she does. The way she says "talk nerdy to me," it gets the point across, right? She says, "I want you to talk about your science and your engineering. You have to do it in the right way, but if you can, talk about it, right? We need to be communicating about those things." That's her message. And it gets across. Even though it's a little campy, it's memorable closing lines. All right, let's watch another introduction.
My subject today is learning, and in that...
Already, I don't like that she started with "my subject today is." I think there are better ways to introduce your topic than coming straight out and telling us that. Let's see what else she does.
Spirit, I want to spring on you all a pop quiz.
That should have been her first words. I want to spring on you all a pop quiz. First thing you do is engage with us, right? Connect with us. Get us involved in some way.
Ready? When does learning begin? Now, as you ponder that question, maybe you're thinking about the first day of preschool or kindergarten, the first time that kids are in a classroom with a teacher. Or maybe you've called to mind the toddler phase when children are learning how to walk and talk and use a fork. Maybe you've encountered the 0 to 3 movement, which asserts that the most important years for learning are the earliest ones. And so your answer to my question would be, learning begins at birth. Well,
This has been a good introduction so far. She has got our attention with her subject of learning, asking us when does learning begin. She's given us a few different theories, and let's see what she reveals to us next as she gets to her topic. As she introduces her topic in the next sentence, we'll see how she connects the way she started with what she's planning to talk about.
today I want to present to you an idea that may be surprising, that may even seem implausible, but which is supported by the latest evidence from psychology and biology. And that is that some of the most important learning we ever do happens before we're born.
Right there is her thesis. The new idea that she's sharing with us is that some of the most important learning that happens in our lives happens before we're born. Thesis. She goes on to qualify and explain a little bit more, but that's her thesis, and that's what we're going to be looking for.
While we're still in the womb. Now, I'm a science reporter. I write books and magazine articles, and I'm also a mother. And those two roles came together for me in a book that I wrote called Origins.
Here she's establishing her credibility. I'm a science journalist. I research science. I write about science. I know what I'm talking about scientifically. But she also says that she's a mother. So she brings in that other aspect of her identity that is extremely relevant to this particular topic. Children and learning and having had her own children. And that also that she's written a book. That is another important part of her credibility on this subject. She goes on to talk more about her book, adding more credibility as we go.
Origins is a report from the front lines of an exciting new field called fetal origins. Fetal origins is a scientific discipline that emerged just about 2 decades ago, and it's based on the theory that our health and well-being throughout our lives is crucially affected by the 9 months we spend in the womb. Now, this theory was of more than just intellectual interest to me. I was myself pregnant while I was doing the research for the book. And one of the most fascinating insights I took from this work is that we're all learning about the world even before we enter it. When we hold our babies for the first time, we might imagine that they're clean slates, unmarked by life, when in fact, they've already been shaped by us and by the particular world we live in. Today, I want to share with you some of the amazing things that scientists are discovering about what fetuses learn while they're still in their mother's bellies. First of all
right, that was her preview statement, where I'm going to share with you some of the things that fetuses learn while they're still in their mother's bellies. And she doesn't tell us what those things are because she's saving her ammunition, right? She's saving those for when she gets there. But that's the main idea that she is going to get across, and that works as a preview statement for her. All right, let's watch this conclusion.
Let me be clear, fetal origins research is not about blaming women for what happens during pregnancy. It's about discovering how best to promote the health and well-being of the next generation.
This is a justification, right? We got hints at justification in your introduction, but this is very clear. Why are we talking about this? We're talking about this to enhance the next generation.
That important effort must include a focus on what fetuses learn during the 9 months they spend in the womb. Learning is one of life's most essential activities, and it begins much earlier than we ever imagined. Thank you.
All right, so this conclusion was brief. She didn't have long summaries of the things, partly because this was a very long speech to begin with, and she was very detailed as she went through, and didn't necessarily need to summarize her main points, but knowing that she didn't have those components in there is important. She kind of hinted at her thesis, again, but didn't say it specifically. She didn't review what her main points were, but she talked about the importance of the concepts. And I will also say that the last words out of her mouth weren't necessarily stirring. I think she could have ended her speech with a little bit more oomph, but it wasn't bad. We'll leave it at that. Let's take a look at some others.
Hi, I'm here to talk to you about the importance of praise, admiration, and thank you, and having it be specific and genuine.
All right, several things that bug me right away. Number one is that she was talking before she got to the middle of the stage. You don't want to do that. You want to walk to the stage. You want to stand there. Give it a second. And I've heard it. One of the very first things I ever learned when I was in high school taking speech is the 3-second rule. You wait 3 seconds before you start talking to your audience. I like to call it the anticipation factor. I want to stand there long enough for me to build the anticipation of the audience. I want my audience to be curious. I want them to be on the edge of their seat. So if I have to stand there for 5 seconds while I build that tension, that's what I'm going to do. If it only takes me a second and a half before I should start talking, that's fine. It's going to be different for everyone for every speech. But she doesn't do that at all. She's talking while she's walking to the front of the stage. Secondly, she jumps right into what she's going to talk about. I'm here to talk to you today about praise and admiration. Similarly to the example we looked at earlier, I don't like, boom, here's my topic. Give me something else, right? Pull me in with something besides, here's what we're going to talk about. Let's see what else she does.
And the way I got interested in this was I noticed in myself when I was growing up until about a few years ago that I would want to say thank you to someone. I would want to praise them. I'd want to take in their praise of me. and I just stop it.
She started here, or what she continued here, talking about her feelings about things she's experienced in her life. She could have, maybe should have, started there. Throughout my life, I have wanted to give praise to people. I have been in situations where I wanted to say thank you when someone did something, but I felt like I couldn't. That would have been a better way to start than today I'm going to talk about while she's running up there.
And I asked myself, why? I felt shy, felt embarrassed. And then my question became, am I the only one who does this? So I decided to investigate.
This is a very short introduction. She doesn't beat around the bush. She just tells us what she's going to talk about. She does justify the topic. She says, here are the things that I've thought about, and I've decided to investigate. We don't have a preview of her main points. We don't know why her specifically is credible to talk about this, besides that she's had some experiences like it. She doesn't really hook us and bring us in. She just kind of tells us what the topic is, and that is the extent of her introduction. So, not a great introduction, right? It's missing some of those parts. Let's take a look at her conclusion.
Why should we care about this? We talk about world peace. How can we have world peace with different cultures, different languages? I think it starts household by household.
All right, so she starts her conclusion, her concluding remarks with, why should we talk about this? I think it has to do with world peace. That's pretty compelling. That's the justification for the topic. Maybe that should have been in her introduction, right? Maybe she should have said, being grateful and having an attitude of gratitude and thankfulness can lead us to a world peace. Let's find out how. That could have been in her introduction. She saved it for the end. I don't know if it was strategic, but she's justifying her topic in her conclusion.
Under the same roof. So let's make it right in our own backyard. And I wanted to thank all of you in the audience for being great husbands, great mothers, friends, daughters, sons. And maybe somebody's never said that to you, but you've done a really, really good job. And thank you for being here and just showing up and changing the world with your ideas. Thank you.
All right, so her final remarks rub me wrong in several different ways. Primarily, I don't like how she tried to put to practice the things she was talking about, right? And you should, right? Typically, you should put into practice in your presentation the thing that you're trying to talk about, right? That makes sense. It's logical. It's good. It's a good way to build your credibility. It's a good persuasive tactic. But in this case, she was complimenting her audience over something she has no knowledge over. She said, thank you for being good parents, for being good mothers, brothers, husbands, wives, sons, and daughters. What if someone out there is an absolutely terrible person? Right? She's validating things that she doesn't know about. And then at the end, she just says, thank you. And she stands there and lets the audience clap, which sometimes is okay. She did it a little awkwardly. She didn't have a lot of awareness of herself. So she rushed to get up there and then took her time leaving at the end. Overall, this speaker, not a great introduction, not a great conclusion, valuable things to say. Right? I don't want to minimize the importance of the things that she was saying, but overall, she's not the best speaker, which is why it's important to put time into your public speaking skills so that when you have good ideas, you can communicate them effectively. All right, let's watch another round of intro and conclusion, this time from a national finalist in informative speaking from 2016 in college public speaking competition.
In late 6th century Athenian courts, trial by combat determined a defendant's verdict. Can you throw a spear through someone's chest? No. Ugh, guilty.
So right away, she caught our attention with some humor. She made us laugh. She talked about a really old school method of determining someone's guilt. We don't know exactly where she's going with this yet, but we'll soon find out.
So when philosopher Solon suggested a paradigm shift in the assessment of justice, the Greeks were a bit hesitant, but eventually evidence and proportional punishment became the norm, rendering Athenian courts more like modern ones and less like a UFC match. Salon's radical framework provided the blueprint for our trial system. Today, Drexel University law professor Adam Benferrado suggests a dramatic shift once again. In his 2015 book, Unfair, The New Science of Criminal Injustice, Benferrado proposes virtual courtrooms in which participants no longer occupy the same space. As a juror, you wouldn't see the judge, lawyer, witnesses, or the defendant, meaning demeanor, appearance, and race can't be considered.
So here she introduces her topic, right? She spent several sentences, or a really long run-on sentence, describing her topic, saying we're going to talk about virtual courtrooms that look kind of like this, allowing for these things. In the process, also starting to justify the topic by talking about how demeanor, appearance, and race would be removed from the equation of a juror passing guilt or innocence on someone, implying that those things, it's bad when those things are considered.
Benferrado argues that these factors have tremendous impact on decisions and are usually the difference between freedom and incarceration.
And this is her justification, right? That she finishes that out. She rounds that out saying, these are the things that are bad. So what I'm going to talk about, my subject, can help fix this, right? It's not a persuasive speech. She's not persuading us to do this. She's telling us about it. But she justifies it because there is a problem that this would be a solution for. That's the justification.
And his idea is catching on. According to ABC News on July 8, 2015, an Australian court successfully tested the model this past summer. At a time when, according to Forbes on February 11, 2016, half of U.S. citizens have no confidence in our justice system, virtual courts present a fascinating option. So let's first explore how they work. Next, reveal some benefits and limitations before finally ruling on some critical implications.
That was her preview statement. We'll look at what it is, look at some benefits and drawbacks, and the implications. Right? Implications can look like a lot of different things. Probably maybe some concerns or different applications of this. But she clearly tells us what the three big picture things she's going to talk about are. And then she has a tagline coming up. She wraps up her conclusion with a tagline that summarizes her introduction and prepares us to hear the rest of the speech.
For the courtroom of the future.
All right, let's watch her conclusion.
Over the span of 900 years, courts have evolved to satisfy the needs of our citizens. That process continues today.
Here she refers back to what she talked about in her introduction. We started with trial by combat. This philosopher suggested something else. We've adopted something else. And it continues today through this idea of virtual courtrooms.
An exploration of virtual courts, its benefits, limitations, along with some critical implications.
Clear review statement. Here's what we did. We looked at this, and this. We looked at A, B, and C. Very clearly, very explicitly said, these are the things we've just done.
We glimpse one possibility of justice's next adaptation. And as exciting as throwing a spear through someone may be.
Again, another clever reference back to the introduction. I don't know that it really helps us cement the ideas, but it at least connects us back to the introduction.
I'll gladly stick with evidence.
I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the last few words of her speech. It just kind of drops off and ends. I'll stick with evidence is nice, but it doesn't really encapsulate the message of her speech. It touches on it, but I don't know that it really sells me on it. So all in all, her conclusion ticked all the boxes. It did the things it needed to do, had a review, revisited her thesis. It had some sort of a tie back to the intro, but it could have been better. Hopefully this has helped you see and practice some of the ideas of intros and conclusions we've been talking about to help you put together one that is effective at setting us up and then summarizing.